Thank you very much for joining me in this video. If you've taken my Money Machine seminar or watched these video series, you know I espouse a very simple plan. Buy one property a year for 10 years, never amortize over more than 15 years, and never sell. Simple plan. And getting started is the toughest part of it, acquiring that first property. There's not only learning the ropes, but there's saving the down payment. And then there's a second property, but as you go along, it gets easier. Your equity builds, your cash flow becomes more positive. The third, fourth, fifth property, it gets easier and easier. And you'll find it's addictive. In most cases, the people who have followed along don't stop at 10. They go on 12, 15, 18, 20 properties, and they continue on. I want to add a little meat to the bones today, and I want to talk about not the financing, not the cash flow, but what do you buy? What should you be putting in your investment portfolio? And I'm a strong advocate of mixing it up. Don't buy all of one thing. Buy one of this type of property, one of that type of property. And there's a reason for that. Well, it balances your portfolio. It leaves you less vulnerable. Sometimes one type of property is in more demand, sometimes it's another. And so it gives you a certain degree of security. And I want to take a look at the pros and cons of 2 or 3 types of properties today. And then next week we'll continue on and look at a couple more. I want to start with single family residence. That's the easiest to buy. Why is it the easiest to buy? Because it's the most plentiful. Drive through your city or town and there's single family homes, 2-story, backsplit, bungalows, all over the place. And you can go anywhere from a starter home to a mansion. And you can decide what price point and what area you want. And you can buy a property that fits your criteria and your comfort level. And understand whatever level you go in, that will dictate the rent area that you're looking at. So single family home is a very important aspect of your rental portfolio. It's also one of the easiest to rent because most people really want their own house. And so it's easier to rent than an apartment in a triplex, as an example. Big demand for it. And it's one of the easiest to manage. The reason I say that is it's understood when somebody rents a single family residence that they're responsible for the lawn care, the raking of the leaves, they're responsible for shoveling the snow, all these sort of things. And there's a little bit less burden on you when it comes to utilities. It's also understood that the tenant will be paying for the heat, will be paying for the hydro, will be paying for the water and sewer. He'll be paying for these expenses, whereas when you're in a multi-family building, you're going to be absorbing some of them. So it makes it a lot easier for you owning a single family residence. What I tell you when you're looking is pick a good location. Remember, real estate's all about location, location, location. Now, it bears in mind a good location within your price point. So if you're going for a starter entry-level bungalow or 2-story, whatever, pick an area that will support it by other homes that are similar around it in the neighborhoods, a good, strong, hopefully upwardly mobile neighborhood. If you want a middle income area, then pick an area that you know in your town that's really, really good and sought after. As a rule of thumb, buy a property that you'd be happy to live in and you won't have a difficult time renting it out. What's the downside of a single family residence? Cash flow. It's tougher to make it carry. The cost versus the rent, you'll probably have to subsidize it or lengthen the amortization. Neither one of them are a great solution, but as your portfolio grows, you'll find that one can subsidize another and the whole portfolio can carry, and you'll want to have some single families in your portfolio. The next one to look at is semi-detached. Semi-detached is very similar to owning a single family residence because the person who rents the single family would look at renting a semi. They still have a complete unit, no neighbors above them or below them. They still have control of their destiny if they like. They still have a yard. And from the landlord's perspective, they still are responsible for the lawn care and the snow removal, and they're responsible for the utilities. The advantage, of course, with a semi is price point. It's a little bit cheaper. It's a little easier to get into. But a word of caution with a semi-detached. I can say this from years of experience. Do your best if you're buying a semi to be able to acquire both sides of the semi. When you acquire one side and somebody else owns the other side, you may have some challenges. I bought a semi-detached one time and I sold the other side to a friend of mine. My philosophy, and it's not the norm with landlords, it's what Winston Churchill once quipped. My tastes are simple. I like the best. So the fellow who owned the other side came to me and said, let's go together and paint the unit. I said, that's fine. Well, I would have gone out and picked the most expensive paint I could buy. He bought the cheapest paint that he could possibly get. And the unit needed painting again in 2 more years. The positive side was able to buy it back out from him, and now I own both sides. But we've all gone through semi-detached, and they're built to look like a uniform building, but all of a sudden the roof is divided in two, and one's the shingle's just about finished, the other side's got a new roof, or one's got different color shingles than the other, or in the front one side's sided and the other side's paint finish, and it just looks terrible. You don't run into those things when you own both sides. So you want to keep that in mind. Semi-detached, you certainly want to acquire some in your investment portfolio, but acquire them in twos. Now, we had a situation one time, I thought it was rather interesting. 2 people, friends, owned a semi-detached, one each side. Each one put a right of first refusal on the other property. So said, if it ever comes up for sale, we want to own both sides. So if either one decided to sell, the other one was secure and he was going to be the one that was going to get it. They understood that. It makes a lot of sense to own both sides. The third property we want to take a look at is multifamily. Now, when I say multifamily, I could be talking about a 100-unit apartment building, a 50-unit, but I'm more likely talking about a duplex and a triplex. And the reason why I say that is once you get 4 and over, most banks consider that commercial. They're looking for a higher degree of expertise on the borrower's part. They're looking for a little more down payment, perhaps, and a higher interest rate on the mortgage. It would be great if we could buy a 12, 15, 20-unit apartment building, because often there'll be a superintendent designated on site, and that superintendent will help with the showings, and if one tenant has a problem, he can be the one that can be the kind of the safety valve to call a tradesman in to repair it. So it's easier as an owner, but it's harder to own. So I'm going to be talking about duplexes or triplexes. And the one thing about a duplex or triplex is you get a better rate of return. You can probably buy a triplex for about what you'd pay for a middle-of-the-road single family, and yet you got 3 rents coming in, and it's going to carry a lot better. The challenges with it, however, are that you're going to be paying the heat, you're going to be paying the water, you're going to be paying, in some cases, some of the hydro, and you've got some challenges that are built in with it. You've got a challenge like who's going to look after cutting the grass and raking the leaves and shoveling the snow. You get a problem that you want to make sure that the mix is such that tenants get along, and there's no guarantee that they will. You get a problem with sound attenuation, because in most buildings, unless they're custom built with concrete floors, you're going to get a certain amount of sound transfer. So much more if it's forced air, but even with hot water heating, with pipes for heating rather than ducting, you're still going to get sound, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so the tenants, if they like each other, if they get along, they put up with the noise. Otherwise, you're going to hear about it. You got a problem balancing the heat. You probably got one thermostat in the building, and one person's too hot, one person's too cold. You got no air conditioning if it's hot water heating. I've found putting in wall-mounted, very much like central air, compressing unit in the ground, are quite expensive to put in. But you get away from these window units where if they're not installed right, they drip, the windowsill can leak, and it can cause all kinds of problems. And then you've also got the problem with fire retrofit. Of course, any building, you got the challenge of fire retrofit, but it's much more continually in poisons you have to look at when you got a duplex or a triplex, because you got common element you got to look at. You got the concern from fire spreading from one unit to another. You don't have those problems with a single family, and to a certain extent with a semi-detached, because usually they have a demising concrete block wall. So I hope that makes sense. Mix it up, have some of one, have some of another. We're going to look at this. That's not all of them. We want to look at condos. We want to look at commercial, industrial. But for the sake of time, we're going to carry those over to next week. Please make sure to watch it again next week. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a good day.